I guess our talk here today is titled Smoke 'Em Out. We're talking about insider attacks. So Keith and I have responded to several incidents during our careers in the security industry. And over the last couple of years, we responded to a lot of attacks which were initiated by insiders, or the footprint at least suggested that. So we thought it would make sense for us to come present it here. A lot of these cases did have a happy ending. Some of them did not. So don't be disheartened, because we are all the time. With that being said, gonna kick this off. Well, just a one slide brief primer. I promise you there's no more marketing stuff here, but this is Intrepidus Group is the company I work for. We're an information security consulting company with offices in New York and Chantilly, application security, network security, mobile security, blah, blah, blah. Thank you. I'm going to let it go to Keith Jones to introduce the company he works for.
So actually Rohit lied, because my slide is the second marketing slide. I work for a company named Jones, Rose, Dykstra and Associates, and we started this in January. We primarily work on reactive type of engagements. So something bad happens, we go and investigate it, or we help a company get back on its feet after that bad thing happened. We do a lot of different things: e-discovery services, which is produce documents for us, to incident response, which is help me stop the bleeding, to government services. We'll do some specialized things for government clients, and we also train in what we do. And if anybody's curious, we're down in Columbia, Maryland. Ready? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and kick off the beginning of this presentation. We're going to talk about three different scenarios. The first one I'm going to talk about is a criminal investigation that I was the expert witness for and actually provided testimony for. We're going to talk about, in these scenarios, we're going to talk about some of the challenges for the individual scenario based upon what it's like to be investigating an insider. Insider attacks are very difficult to investigate because most of the time your insider is going to have deep knowledge of the network, deep knowledge of the computers, deep knowledge of how the business works, deep knowledge of how your investigations work. So basically everything that you know doing the investigation, probably the person you're investigating knows the exact same thing and or maybe even more. You're going to see that usually with the insider attacks there's minimal footprinting up front, because they already know what the network looks like. They already know where the crown jewels are on the network. They have usually access to the network, so that means they can then alter logs. You know, a lot of times logs are the only thing that you have that points to a person of doing some bad deed on your network. Well, if it's a sysadmin, for instance, that sysadmin may have access to the logs and then can change it, either delete what he did or even point it to somebody else. And in some instances, the hacker, the bad guy in the scenario, could even be in on the investigation. I've been in investigations where we have anywhere from 2 people up to 25 people, all involved from companies that I worked with and the companies that we're doing the investigation with. And it could be one of the people that's sitting right there, and they're seeing your remediation plan, they're seeing where you're going during the investigation, and so forth. So all these things we're going to talk about during these 3 scenarios of just different types of attacks that we've seen and different types of incidents. So the first one I'm going to speak about is United States versus Roger Geronio. This went to trial last June, July of 2006, and the investigation actually started, at least when I got involved, way back in 2003. In case you're curious who these people are on the front, that's the United States on the left-hand side, the AUSAs, and that's the Roger Geronio on the right-hand side. So what's the overview of this case? There's a victim company. The victim was UBS Payne Weber. I'm going to abbreviate throughout UBS PW. The defendant's Roger Geronio, and what happened? Well, between November 2001 and March 4th, 2002, Roger Geronio put a logic bomb on their computer network. So if you're not all that familiar with what UBS does, imagine stock transactions, right? Stock transactions happen over a computer network. If you were to stop that computer network from working, stock transactions, in theory, would stop. That's what he was counting on by putting the logic bomb on the computer network. When UBS was asked to figure out what type of loss that they took from this logic bomb, That was the number. It was over $3 million. It was actually a lot larger than this. This is just what they figured they spent on consultants, lost transactions, and so forth. And actually what came out during the trial, which was really interesting, was that even though this is a nice, tidy little number that we have up here, 3.1 million, they actually felt the effects of this logic bomb for years and years and years to come when they had to go back for backup tapes or something else. This always tend to sneak back into their operations. All right, so the defendant is Roger Geronio, and in the company, he was one of the senior Unix administrators. So what that means is, we go back to the insider. He has the keys to the kingdom. He knows where the crown jewels are. He knows how he can stop the network if he wanted to. What happened was, this is, if you remember the dates I gave you, it was November 2001, which is right after 9/11, right? So everybody's on edge, especially around New York City. And what happens is, a lot of companies weren't doing well business-wise, and UBS was no exception. So they each year would have bonuses for different employees that worked there. And in this particular year, the employees weren't getting the same bonus that they were seeing, throughout the .com era and so forth, right? So they're getting shorted this year. And Roger Geronio was not happy about this. So what he decided to do is put a logic bomb on the network, which would take out the computer network. But at the same time, he bought these things in stocks called put options, which, if you've never heard them before, just think if the stock loses money, you make money. So basically, you're betting against a company. So in effect, if you think about it, he was betting against the company he was currently working for. All right, so the investigation started on March 4th, 2002 when the logic bomb went off, and it went through July 2006, which is about the time that the trial ended. The people in the investigation, there's Secret Service was involved, Agent O'Neill was involved. There's 2 AUSAs that were involved, Maura Wolf and Grady O'Malley. This is all out of Newark, New Jersey. And I should just side note it, that actually during this investigation, I went through 3 different company names, and we also went through 3 different AUSAs. So it seemed like every time we picked it back up, they call up and say, hey, I'm your new AUSA for this. So, during one of these criminal investigations, they're not real fast, close and shut like corporate investigations. They just seem to keep going on and on and on and on. So I stayed on since the beginning with Agent O'Neill, and we went from the beginning of the investigation portion through to the end when I did the actual testimony. And then there's myself at the end, the expert. All right, so what was the government claiming? The government claimed that Roger Geronio's performed securities fraud. So he bet the put options against UBS Paine Webber. He was betting that because he had inside information that the computer network was going to go down, he was betting that the stock would also go down, and therefore he would make money. One of the other indictments was using a computer during this fraud, and then there were 2 other ones, which was mail fraud. Have you ever seen an indictment? There's barely a crime that goes out there that mail fraud's not attached to. So basically, if there's any piece of paper that goes through the mail, even remotely related to your crime, usually you see mail fraud on there. I'm not going to talk about it later, but I'll just touch on why mail fraud's on there. If anybody's done stock transactions before, at least more back in the day, but what happens is usually you buy stock, right? And then that company has got to say, all right, you now own 20 shares of whatever that company is. The particular institutions that he chose were basically a paper receipt went through the mail. And because that paper receipt went through the mail, that's where the mail fraud comes in. All right, so now we know what the investigation is. We know the background. We know who is involved and why. Now we have the evidence that we have to look at. So at the point when I was called in, they said, here's the evidence that we have. And they hand me a big black box, the Secret Service. And we had initially 20 backup tapes from relevant servers. And the relevant servers in this case were AIX and Solaris servers. Not so fun for tape backups. We have VPN logs. So anytime anybody from outside the network were to come into the network, it was logged. So that was useful. We had 1 report from At Stake at the time. They did the initial response, basically go in, stop the bleeding. And they wrote a report about it. And everything you'll find in trials is discoverable, meaning, it comes out in court and everybody gets to read it, the defendant gets it, the government gets it. So this was also something I was given to take a look at and, see the claims that they made. Then later on, we had 70 plus tapes surface. We only ended up analyzing 16 of them because they were snapshots over weeks and so forth. One of the most important pieces of evidence was the EnCase images from Roger Dronio's house. There were 4 hard drives, 2 computers that the Secret Service seized when they went in and did the search warrant. And yes, at the very bottom, you see the bullet. There was a hard copy of the logic bomb sitting on his dresser. So this is what I had to work with, starting from the beginning. All right, so let me back up. I can't assume everybody knows all the components of the logic bomb, but let me discuss how I had to present it to a jury. So for some of you, this is going to seem real watered down. But what I chose to do during this presentation is, you probably all know what a logic bomb is, but I want to show what we had to show to a jury, which could be somebody from a car factory, never seen a computer. It could be like my grandparents that never owned a computer. It could be anybody on the jury, and I had to explain what a logic bomb was. So these are actual real PowerPoints that I took from the actual trial when I testified for 5 days. I took the exact ones, put it in here, just to show you what the steps we had to go through to explain it to a person that may have never seen a computer, what these different components are and what they did, and how we broke them down, and how we were able to say this particular part is associated with this particular individual, which is can be very difficult to do once you're talking about insider attacks such as this. Because the defense, what's the easiest defense? If anything ever happened and you were being questioned, it was a hacker. I don't know. It was a hacker that did it. And that was obviously the defense in this case was, the scary hackers out there in 2001, and it was not him. It was not him. And what we had to do from the government's position is you had to go through and take every piece of the logic bomb and show how it was put onto the computer systems, how it was disseminated, how it was activated, and actually what did it do to the computer systems, and what would the UBSP and Weber staff see when this logic bomb occurred. So let me go ahead and run through these components here. We have 4 main components to this logic bomb. It was the trigger mechanism, payload, delivery mechanism, persistence mechanism. And when you're explaining a trigger mechanism to a jury, even though it would be prejudiced to put all these different pictures in there in the real one. Any funny pictures, by the way, I added for this just to keep you guys awake. But I had to explain a trigger mechanism is, you remember the dynamite in Looney Tunes? Remember the little alarm clock on there? The alarm clock is the trigger mechanism. What it does in this case is it sat there and it waited for a particular time. Now I showed you the date that the logic bomb went off, and that was March 4th, 2002. What I didn't tell you was March 4th, 2002 was a Monday. And more importantly, the logic bomb went off at 9:30 in the morning, which is when the stock market opens, right? So basically, the very first Monday, the Monday on March 4th, 2002, right when the stock market opens, you see the computer network just basically disappears. That's what this logic bomb it was designed to do. And the trigger mechanism was just that one little component that says, it is now March 4th, 2002, it is 9:30 in the morning, detonate. And this is the actual trigger mechanism. This is what was found on his dresser too. Might be a little difficult to see. I'll just explain the different components in here. But at the very beginning, what it does is it asks the computer a series of questions. The very first question it says is,